It's alarming to witness the United States embark on what could become the most aggressive trade war in modern history. President Donald Trump has officially imposed a massive wave of tariffs on three of America's largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China. This sets the stage for economic retaliation that could spiral into something far more serious, transcending mere trade disputes and delving into issues of power, control, and the very future of global economic alliances. The sheer scale of these tariffs is staggering. All imports from Mexico will now face a 25% tariff, impacting every product from automobiles to avocados and medical equipment. Canada faces the same 25% tariff across its exports, with an additional 10% levy specifically targeting Canadian energy. Meanwhile, existing tariffs on Chinese goods have been doubled from 10% to 20%, further straining an already fragile economic relationship between Washington and Beijing. Trump's justification centers on national security. In a press conference, he asserted that illegal drugs continue to pour into the country from Mexico and Canada at unacceptably high levels. He framed the tariffs as a necessary measure to protect American industries, jobs, and families. However, critics both domestically and internationally argue that this has less to do with security and more to do with politics. The backlash was immediate. Canada, known for its measured diplomatic responses, swiftly retaliated. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made it clear that the United States would not escape economic aggression without facing severe consequences. His government enacted retaliatory tariffs on $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, matching Trump's 25% tax. But this was just the beginning. In a statement that reverberated through global markets, Trudeau declared Canada's readiness to escalate further. The initial $30 billion in tariffs took effect immediately, with an additional $125 billion scheduled to roll out within 21 days. Trudeau accused Trump of attempting to dismantle Canada's economy, suggesting a broader strategy to make the country vulnerable to U.S. influence. He posited that Trump views economic chaos in Canada as a stepping stone towards his long-discussed goal of making Canada the 51st state of the United States. This accusation, while sounding like a plot from a political thriller, was not made lightly. Trudeau suggested Trump's ultimate aim was to weaken Canada to the point where annexation became a real possibility, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles. When asked if Canada would ever allow this, Trudeau responded firmly, "That is never going to happen." Trump, of course, denies these claims. However, it's worth noting that he has publicly floated the idea of Canada joining the U.S. as an additional state, both in social media posts and campaign speeches. With economic pressure now used as a weapon, many are questioning if a deeper strategy is at play. Canada's retaliation extends beyond tariffs. Trudeau also challenged what he described as Trump's outright lies regarding trade relations. He refuted Trump's claim that fentanyl was pouring across the Canadian border, calling it completely bogus. He also corrected Trump's statement that U.S. banks were not allowed to operate in Canada, pointing out the long-standing presence of American financial institutions in the country. Beyond the immediate economic ramifications, the impact of this escalating trade war is already being felt on Wall Street. Investors, caught off guard by Trump's willingness to disrupt global markets, triggered an immediate dive in stocks, with major indexes sliding as uncertainty gripped financial markets. The economic fallout could be catastrophic if this standoff prolongs. The looming question is whether Mexico and China will remain passive. History suggests they won't. Both countries wield significant leverage over the United States. China holds a substantial amount of U.S. debt and controls a large portion of the global supply chain. Mexico, deeply integrated into the North American auto industry, could retaliate in ways that would severely impact American manufacturers. Retaliation is not just likely, it's inevitable. The world has witnessed trade wars before, but nothing on this scale. The U.S., Canada, Mexico, and China, four of the largest economies on the planet, are now on a collision course. What began as tariffs could quickly escalate into something much larger, including supply chain disruptions, job losses, inflation spikes, and diplomatic fractures. for American consumers, the impact will be immediate. Prices on everything from groceries to cars and household goods are likely to rise as import costs skyrocket. Supply chains will be thrown into chaos, and as other nations respond, U.S. exports will suffer, potentially harming the very industries Trump claims to be protecting. The global economy, already fragile after years of pandemic recovery, supply chain shortages, and inflation struggles, now faces further instability with this trade war. The unpredictability of what happens next is concerning. Will Trump escalate? Will Canada expand its response? Will Mexico and China retaliate in ways that cripple U.S. industries? One thing is certain, this is no longer just about trade. It's about economic warfare, political maneuvering, and the long-term future of North America's financial stability. With both sides entrenched, the worst may be yet to come. Canada wasted no time in retaliating. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made it clear that the United States would not engage in economic bullying without consequence. Within hours of Trump's tariffs taking effect, Canada responded with aggressive countermeasures, signaling the start of a protracted trade war. Trudeau's initial move was to impose a 25% tariff on $100 billion worth of U.S. goods, directly targeting American industries dependent on exports to Canada. The response was structured in two waves: $30 billion in tariffs immediately, and an additional $125 billion scheduled over the next 3 weeks. This staggered approach sends a clear message to Washington: if the U.S. doesn't back down, Canada is ready to escalate. However, the most shocking part of Canada's response was the series of additional countermeasures from Trudeau's government and provincial leaders, designed to inflict real economic pain on American businesses and consumers. Ontario, the country's largest province, announced a 25% export tax on electricity supplied to the United States, impacting 1.5 million homes in states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. Premier Doug Ford warned that this was just the beginning, threatening to halt electricity exports entirely if Trump escalated tariffs again in April, diverting power to support Canadian manufacturers. Beyond energy, Ford targeted the U.S. defense industry, threatening to cut off nickel supplies, an essential material for aerospace and batteries, impacting the U.S. military and high-tech manufacturing. Elon Musk's Starlink contract was also revoked, signaling real consequences for American businesses. In a dramatic move, Ontario removed all American-made alcoholic products from the LCBO, a significant blow to U.S. alcohol exporters. Nova Scotia followed suit, banning American businesses from bidding on government contracts, doubling tolls for American commercial vehicles, and removing U.S. alcohol from its markets. Premier Tim Houston pledged to reduce reliance on the U.S. market, strengthening interprovincial trade and expanding into global markets. Alberta condemned the tariffs as an economic attack, hinting at countermeasures targeting American businesses and warning of rising fuel prices for American drivers. Premier Danielle Smith called for national unity, urging provinces to tear down trade barriers and fast-track infrastructure projects to reduce reliance on the U.S. economy. She also called for increased military spending. Manitoba and Newfoundland and Labrador followed with similar actions, removing American alcohol products and reviewing government contracts to reduce reliance on U.S. goods and services. Canadian leaders are sending a clear message: they will not be pushed around. The economic shockwaves of this trade war are already being felt, with Wall Street in full panic mode. Investors, caught off guard by Trump's willingness to disrupt financial markets, triggered a massive sell-off, wiping out trillions in market value. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged, as did the S&P 500 and Nasdaq, signaling long-term instability. Industries exposed to international trade, particularly automakers like General Motors and Ford, are facing financial disaster. Their supply chains, built on integrated trade with Canada and Mexico, are threatened, leading to manufacturing cost increases and higher car prices. The home building industry is also reeling, with increased lumber costs impacting housing affordability. The technology sector, reliant on Chinese manufactured components, faces higher production costs. Investors are moving to safer assets, fearing an economic slowdown or recession. The stock market chaos is fueled by fears of long-term economic slump, with higher import costs pushing inflation and supply chain disruptions impacting businesses. Ordinary Americans are feeling the effects, with businesses preparing to raise prices on goods. The food industry, reliant on Mexican produce, will see higher prices on essentials. Retailers face increased costs on Chinese imported goods, and the travel industry is impacted by canceled trips. Tensions between the US and Canada are at an all-time high, with Canada signaling a shift away from reliance on the US market. The global response is unfolding, with the EU and Mexico poised to retaliate. Trump's strategy, rooted in his America First approach, has reshaped the economic landscape. With markets in freefall, industries in turmoil, and consumers bracing for higher costs, the damage is significant. Trump could escalate or negotiate, but this trade war is a defining moment of his presidency. The world and the markets are watching, and the uncertainty is poison for the economy, with the potential for devastating financial consequences. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.